Right, Barry McGuigan. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about your book. It's a fascinating book. It is Cyclone: My Story. And as I said, we talked about your famous match in 1985, watched by 20 million people when you beat Eusebio Pedrosa. And the fact that Nelson Mandela watched it as well, which is quite incredible. Yes. Just a couple of the details from that match before we come on to some other stories. You talk in the book about dehydrating before a fight. Yeah. Just tell us a bit about that, and how dangerous that is to a boxer.
Well, 99% of boxers struggle to make weight, so they have to, what they call in the business, dry out. So they basically actually, and it's a very fine balance between making yourself too weak, and especially in the lighter weight divisions, and retaining as much strength as possible. When I done it back in 1985, you weighed in at 9 o'clock in the morning, 9:30, and you boxed at 9 o'clock that night, so you didn't have enough time to rehydrate. But some guys nowadays, you weigh in at 2:30 on a Friday, and you'll box at 9 o'clock on a Saturday. So guys can put on overnight stone weight. It's hard to believe that, but they actually can do it without any repercussions, and it can be stronger. But so everybody has to dry out to a certain extent. And there are guys who weight making difficulty can be not so bad, and severe. And obviously that is a risky business too, because you don't want to be too dried out, because you might suffer as a consequence.
Yeah, you get headaches, don't you, from dehydration?
Well, not really. I mean, it's a different. You get headaches in boxing all the time because you get hit on the head.
Just one on top of another.
You get it from sparring, a hard sparring session, but you become accustomed to it. You get used to getting hit, and
if you don't like headaches, don't go into boxing. Let's talk about in 1985. So was when you won that big match, which was also the height of the troubles in Northern Ireland. You married your childhood sweetheart, Sandra.
I'm a Catholic. She's a Protestant.
So 1982 you married. So she's Protestant. You're Catholic. Height of the troubles as you're fighting, and you learnt that Republican terrorists were plotting to kidnap you.
Yeah, I heard that, and in fact I knew it was pretty serious, because I was issued with a handgun. And it was around the time that they were, a couple of people, I think one guy had been kidnapped, and they kidnapped Shergar, you might remember, they were holding for ransom. So I think the authorities sort of alerted me that, and they were worried and concerned about it. So I got plainclothes escorts in the north and in the south of Ireland. And
for how long?
I can't remember, 6 months. Yeah.
So how many of them would there be with you?
There was a couple of guys on either side of the border that just stayed in the distance.
Wherever you were, they were getting a car with you, and they would travel with you. And
no, they wouldn't travel in the car. They travel behind me, in north and south. So I knew
the sort of security a sort of a high-ranking politician gets, effectively. You were being followed by these guys. And did they teach you how to use the gun?
They did, yeah.
Were you any good with it?
Useless. I couldn't hit a barn door. I was rubbish with it. But it was funny. I mean, it was funny. I kept the gun for about a year, and then when I moved to England, I had to give it back. So otherwise you had to have a license over there. You had to apply for a license. You had to have a safe and a key and all that sort of stuff. So I gave the gun back, and
But but the police gave you the gun. Aren't you allowed a gun under those circumstances?
Yes, but when I moved from one proximity to another,
different jurisdiction.
Different jurisdiction didn't need it.
What did they? Couldn't that be more dangerous? I mean, what was their advice? So they give you personally a gun, and if there was an attempt to kidnap you, what's their advice? That you pull out a gun and start shooting?
I don't know. I don't know. What, I mean, it never got to that. So I suppose because I had the security, and thankfully it never materialised. But I suppose it wouldn't have been a wise thing to do for whoever it was that was threatening me to have taken me. It wouldn't, because I had I had a lot of support from both sections of the community, and but it was genuinely there, and it was real, and I can joke and laugh about it now, but it was a worrying time.
But also, you have you always had a very non-political stance. You had support from both sides of the divide. Yeah. People, there was the saying, "Leave the fighting to McGuigan," was a saying that people meant to imply, peace in Ireland. Yeah. It was. You seemed in that sense like a poor choice of target.
Yeah, maybe, but the threat was genuine. All I know is that it was a genuine threat, and it was there, and it was real, and I had to to get this gun. I had to have practice with it. I had escorts on both sides, and guys were watching me, keeping an eye on me, and thankfully nothing ever happened and nothing materialised from it, and
it all went away. But
it all went away,
but
it was very much a worrying time. Yeah,
for your family as well, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
You nearly gave up boxing. After we talked at the beginning of this conversation about how you've enjoyed so much success, but also it's been a life beset by quite a lot of tragedy,
pathos and sadness. Yeah, I know you're going to refer to young Ali.
Yes,
I had a boxing match with young Ali in 1982, and as a result of that, I knocked him out in the 6th round, and he never recovered and died 5 months later. So that was a very difficult time during the embryonic stages of my career. I had really no money. I had committed my life to boxing. My wife was pregnant. She was working 6 days a week to build a future for ourselves, and I had to make a decision. It was a long time, and I didn't want to box, didn't want to continue, and because of what I'd done, and I felt very bad about it, and so I had to make a decision as to whether I wanted to carry on or not. And I just thought, well, if positions had been reversed, would that young man have stopped? And I said no, he wouldn't. He would have continued on, and I went on and dedicated it the night that I won the world title. In tears, I dedicated it to young Ali, and Harry Carpenter was able to interpret what I was saying, although I was in tears and muffled my voice, but he was able to articulate the points I was trying to make to the 20 million people.
To the 20 million people watching that night. You talk in the book as well a lot about your father being a very big inspiration to you, huge. And he used to sing Danny Boy.
That's right. He sang Danny Boy in the ring, and hugely emotional song. And then the night that I won the world title, 27,000 people there sang it back at him. You're on a knife edge of emotion when you're in the ring. It's incredible. And I never listened to the song because I couldn't afford to, because you get emotional yourself. So I just didn't think about it, and I used to repeat a little saying to myself over and over again, and try and focus on what I was doing. But it was an incredible night.
Another member of your family who was incredibly devoted to you was your brother Dermot. Who sadly committed suicide in 1994. Tell us a bit about what kind of a guy he was.
He was a great guy. Far more talented than I was. Probably didn't have the manic work ethic that I had, but he was a brilliantly talented guy, much better boxer than me. He was a scratch golfer, great snooker player, anything with the ball he was exceptional at, and he dedicated a lot of his life to me to help me prepare for my fights and that, and so his loss in 1994 was pretty devastating to me. He was only 34 years old. The experts said he was parasuicidal, that he wouldn't take his life, but 10 days later he put a rope around his neck and hung himself.
But always there for you at all those fights.
Incredible, and so I miss him an awful lot and think about him every day, and he was a tremendous support to me.
And your daughter Danica as well features in the book as well. She was diagnosed with leukemia. She was 11 at the time, or given the all clear in 1999. But a terribly difficult time for you.
Oh yeah, shocking. I mean, I was actually making a movie at the time in over in Ireland with Daniel Day-Lewis and Jim Sheridan. One of the best years of my life, incredible. And right at the end of the movie, 3 days from the end of the movie, I got a phone call, and I had to rush to the phone, and I could hear my wife sobbing in the distance, and my family doctor told me, Dr. Kesson told me that, I don't know how to tell you this, Barry, but Danica's got leukemia. So it was like someone could have hit me with a hammer. So I then had to just leave the set, and Daniel and Jim said go, and I went to St. Bart's Hospital, and they were brilliant, incredible, but it was shocking time, and she was in the high dependency ward because she was high risk, because she was 11 and a half, and 7 kids in the ward, 4 of them died, and going to 4 funerals and knowing those 4 families. And
you went to the funeral of the other kids on the ward?
Those kids, shocking. But there we are, and so that's why I'm a patron of Click Sargent, which is the largest childhood and teenage cancer unit in the country, and we do as much as we can. Myself and Eddie Jordan and Gary Lineker and various other people who commit their time to it, and it's very, very important.
And that's why it's a good thing and important thing to include all of these stories in your book, isn't it?
Yeah.
You made a documentary for 5 Live a few years ago with our boxing correspondent Mike Costello. About, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, wasn't it? It was
about 3 years ago.
About 3 years ago.
That's correct.
Called Life After Boxing.
Yeah.
Which is obviously something you address in the book as well.
Yeah.
The point you make is that for a lot of boxers, it's very difficult to carve out a role for yourself.
Yeah, the boxing part's easy, Richard. It's when it's all over. That's when the difficulty begins. Because nobody can explain to you, nobody can tell you, because you're so individual, and boxers are so individual. Then when it all ends, how do you then? Because you're a young man most of the time when you quit, and you have 2 times, if you're lucky, 3 times that to live for the rest of your life. And how do you do that successfully? Nobody teaches you how to cope with life after boxing. It's very tough. And so many guys have had problems. Frank, Bruno, and Tyson, and so those are the high-profile ones. But there are thousands of others who don't have, who don't get. We don't know about. We don't know about, and who have great difficulty.
You say in football, you lose a game and you play again 3 days later. In boxing, you lose a match and your career's over.
Yeah. So well, you're only as good as you're only as good as your last fight. So it's very tough for guys, and I wish there was a better system. I tried with the Professional Boxers Association to help most guys get something to finish when their career that would run parallel with their career, so when it's all over they would have something else. It didn't work because they were grown up and it was difficult to get them to change. Old habits die hard. So now with the Barry McGuigan Boxing Academies, I'm in 4 colleges in different parts of the country. I'm in South Leicestershire, East Berkshire, Filton College, Bristol, Stockport, and we're moving into another 2 in September. And the idea is to try and encourage young boxers to stay in school and to get a qualification so that they have something else. They don't have just their boxing. They don't put all their eggs in the one basket.
How did you do it? How did you find that role? You've carved out a brilliant and successful and very clear role for yourself post boxing.
It's taken a couple of years to actually get that together. I met a guy called Kevin Hamlin in Filton College, who's a very clever man. Great. He's probably one of the biggest ACE providers in the country. ACE's Advanced Apprenticeship in Sporting Excellence. Rebecca Adlington would be one of the main flag bearers for, and it basically takes young talented kids and allows them to do a sports science degree, and they can do their training as well. And that's through him I was able to help develop a scheme of work that allow and would fit in around any subject, whether it be carpentry through to plastering, bricklaying, plumbing, or something more academic like sports science or accountancy.
Ken Buchanan, remind us who he was.
He was the world lightweight champion, incredible fighter. He's a Hall of Famer like myself. There's only 3 of us in the UK.
And he's you spoke about him and the struggles that he had.
Yeah.
After what happened to Ken after his?
Well, basically he was a carpenter and then he was a professional fighter. He was an incredible champion. Great recognition out in America. Went out to Panama and beat the great Ismail Laguna, and lost to the incredible fighter Roberto Duran, one of the greatest fighters of all time. And he didn't have anything to do afterwards. He went through a nasty divorce and lost a lot of his money and just struggled. And he's a great guy, but it's very difficult for fighters. Nobody teaches them how to cope with life after boxing. It's a tough one, and it's always more beneficial. It's always easier when you've got something else to run parallel.
A grounding.
Yeah, well, it's always good if you have something else as well as boxing. If you invest all your time in boxing and neglect doing something else, and every one of us have got another skill, you should try and focus on that too. Because it's a good release from boxing, because you need to be able to switch off. It becomes obsessive if you're doing it 24 hours a day.
Barry, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
It's great spending some time in your company.
Thanks, Richard.
And the book is out now, and as you've heard there, it's been a fascinating life.
Cyclone, my story, and I'm signing tomorrow at Waterstones in Leadenhall Market, so don't forget and come down and see me.
There we go, my story, and what a story it is. Barry McGuigan, Cyclone, my story, out now. Barry, thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
We'll start the moaning after the news. It's 3:34. You can stick around for that if you like.
Stay.
It's 3:34.